bam, Mr. Taru. So my wife and I are on a leisurely drive the other day, and she starts yelling, stop the car, and she's doing what she's always doing, looking on the side of the road for discarded items. And this time she actually found something that can be a great addition to our backyard, because we already have a bench very similar to this. Someone took this cast iron bench that had a bunch of rotted wood on it, and apparently they've tried to remove some of the wood and got some rusted out bolts and didn't know what to do with it, so they threw it away. And we're going to do one of our favorite projects, which is take a pallet and upcycle it to be an awesome bench. Now, this is a bench that was already in our backyard, and it has been in our backyard for a very long time, and well, its wood had rotted out. So we just got done finishing rebuilding this bench that we've had using pallet wood, and we thought that was a perfect time to share this latest project with you. Now, the first part of your project is to make sure that when you paint the ends of your benches, they don't start chipping immediately. So you're going to have to make sure you prep them, get all the rust off, get the chipping paint off. And to do that, you're going to want a wire brush at the end of drill would be nice, or a hand wire brush, and some paint scrapers. And work on getting rid of all the old paint and rust that you can, so your paint job lasts as long as possible. Now, for getting these bolts off of this bench, you can use a hacksaw, or I've got an inexpensive reciprocating saw. You're also going to want a dust mask and a set of safety goggles. Okay, a couple of tips here. We're about ready to cut one of these bolts off so I can start sanding and wire brushing this metalwork. My wife came up with this idea of, at the end of your extension cord, get a power strip so that you can plug in your, well, right now I have a reciprocating saw, a plug for my camera, and a plug for my drill, and you don't have to keep plugging in and plugging in your tools as you work. And that's how easy it can be to cut off all these bolts. So look in the sales, and if you do a lot of projects, get yourself one of these inexpensive, get an inexpensive reciprocating saw. It's also going to come in very handy when you start taking apart that pallet. So I have the two ends of our bench cleaned up and hanging here, so we can paint both sides of it and not having to worry about painting one side of this metalwork and then letting it dry and then flip it and paint the other side. It goes a lot quicker when it's hanging. And a lot of times when doing these metal projects, painting metal, I use enamel paint and brush it on. In this case, I'm going to use some spray-on paint. When you use your spray paint, make sure that you keep the can about 12 inches from the surface. Go in sweeping motions. Don't just, and every time you go to make a pass, start and stop the paint. And just kind of like, you don't want to, just hit the trigger and start moving it all over the place, because eventually your hand's going to stop, and wherever your hand stops, you're going to get too much paint there and it will start to drip. And I don't know if I mentioned this or not, but as you're wire brushing the surface, not only are you trying to get the old paint off, but the paint that doesn't come off, you're going to rough up the surface to get a better bond with the paint. Okay, so we got our first coat on. You'll certainly need to put a couple of coats on, and with all of this metal work and intricacy, you're going to think you're done. Pull this down and then see that you've missed another spot. So it'll take a couple of tries to make sure you get this completely covered, again, without any runs. Now about these pallets. You can find these pallets, big box stores like your Home Depot, your Publix, your Walmarts. They want to reuse those pallets. They send them back. You can't get pallets from them. But you go around your neighborhood and look for your small businesses, maybe a carpet store, and look behind there or just ask if they had any pallets that they're willing to give up. And that is how we find these pallets. We just drive around and find small businesses that don't have a system of constantly reusing them. However, pallets are made to be strong and to be reused in most cases. So when you do these pallet projects, you're going to want to have it at a minimum a hammer and a crowbar to pull these apart. They don't just simply, you just look at them and they start coming apart. They're actually quite difficult. And they can actually be also quite frustrating, because when you're using a hammer and a crowbar to pry these apart, because the nails are the type that those twisted type nails quite often don't want to pull out of wood, that you'll start splintering the boards up that you might have wanted to use, and so it can be can ruin your project or require you to go get another pallet. Just ask me how I know. So now we have discovered another use for that reciprocating saw. This is actually the reason why I bought a reciprocating saw in the first place, is you just get yourself an inexpensive reciprocating saw and manage to put your, there we go, little dust mask on top of your eyeballs. Okay, and get yourself a metal blade or wood blade. The wood blades will work, but they'll get eaten up by the nails pretty quickly. This is a metal blade on our reciprocating saw, and start slipping it between the support and the top boards that you want to use. And eventually you'll cut that free and you'll have yourself a undamaged board. Maybe some little pieces of metal in there, but you can work around those. At least I've found. And that is it. I'm just going to repeat that process through all the connection points and get these top boards. This is going to be the seating surface of our new bench. And by the way, I didn't realize this when I started working with pallets, but there are chemically treated pallets to keep, this is their outdoors, to keep the bugs from chewing them up. And there are heat treated pallets. You can find that stamp right over here. Now, I'm not going to pretend to know everything that goes on in treating pallets so that they can survive outdoors and be reused over and over again over the years, but I do know now that if you find this HT stamp, that means it's going to be much safer for you to be around and working with, a lot less dangerous than those very nasty chemicals that they use in the chemically treated pallets. All right. So we have used our reciprocating saw to free the upper slats of our pallet like I showed you. We're going to need 10 boards, which are 2 3/4 inches wide. Also make sure as you're salvaging for a pallet, looking for pallets, that you get some boards that are thick enough to support a weight of a couple of people as they sit on the bench. And I got really lucky on the previous bench that I showed you, but on not so much on this one. The wood's very nice, but I need these to be like I said, 2 3/4 inches wide, and they came off the old other pallet that we found just that size, but in this case we have to cut them down. This would go a lot quicker with a table saw, but I don't have one. So a couple of sawhorses, a circular saw, and we're going to do the best we can here. I usually have a helper, but she's not here right now, so I'll do the best I can working this out. We're going to make using this first board that we've already made, use it as a template, draw a pencil line, and your saw, make sure this is unplugged or turned off. Okay, with no power, your circular saws are going to, let's get that power strip around here, there we go. Your power saws, of course, have an adjustment for depth. It's usually back here on the side. You can pull this up in this case and adjust how deep we're going to cut. Now, again, I'm here alone in this particular case and doing this alone. So I've cut, again, there's no power, and I'm going to set the depth of the saw just so it barely touches the 2x4 support that we have underneath. Lock it down, and that way I can run this along the board pretty much until I hit the clamp I have out here at the end, holding the board in its place, and I don't have to worry about tearing up my sawhorses. So, probably not a good habit, but I'm going to go ahead and just let my glasses protect my eyes, because I've ruined my safety goggles recently. Well, actually earlier today. I should get a new one, but new pair. But for right now, let's go ahead and get this started. Okay. Now, we're only building a bench here, so it's not like we're doing fine carpentry, but I've measured this line so that it is 2 3/4 inches wide. I'm going to run the blade just to the right of that line. Okay, so I just have to repeat that 8 or 9 more times, and I'll have my boards, and we'll move on to the next stage of building our bench. So now I've got my 11 boards cut, and the next thing to do to make this bench comfortable to sit on, well, of course we're going to have to sand these boards off, but just because I've got this nice $7.50 router that I got at a yard sale probably about 20 years ago, and it's still holding strong, I've got like a little 1/4 round bit on the end of this router, and I'm just going to, on the top of these boards where this is going to be the seating surface, just hit the corners of these boards so they're nice and rounded off. So I'm just going to repeat that to, all of these boards. It's really nice if you have a helper. I'm not sure why I have these sawhorses set so low that I have to squat, but at any rate, I'm using a clamp on one side of this to keep the board from moving around too much as I round off these edges. But you don't need to see me route the edges of, what would that be, 22 corners. So let's finish this and move on to the next step. So we have our 10 boards cut, each at 2 3/4 inches wide. By the way, I don't think I ever told you how long this was. It'll vary by pallet, and the length of these boards will determine the width of your bench. These are 44 inches, 44 1/4 inches long. And I need to, actually, I have not finished this yet. I took one of these 2 3/4 inch boards and cut it in half. That's going to be for the very top of the bench. And if you don't have a router, and you found one like I did at a yard sale super cheap, and you don't want to buy a router, you can take your palm sander and run it along the edge, the sharp edge where, because you don't want these things cutting into your leg, and just kind of rock the sander back and forth with some 80 grit sandpaper, and just keep rocking that back and forth along the length, and you'll get a little bit of a rounded edge on these boards so they won't be uncomfortable. Now, hopefully you can see this on the camera, but as you look at these bolts that go up the sides of our bench, they're not all dead center in these boards. When I started to reassemble this bench, I started pre-drilling all the holes, and within the second board realized that there was going to be a problem. The holes that are drilled into or formed in the sides of this bench are not all perfectly aligned. So you want to, and you'll see me do this, we're going to set up some measurements and pre-drill some holes and install one of these boards that'll kind of very loosely hold the sides of the bench together. And then I use some spacers in between these boards. It was 1/4 and 1 nut that I used at the back of these bolts to space out the boards and make them even, and then just drilled the holes wherever they needed to. And if one of the bolts was a little high or right in the middle or a little low, I don't really love that, but at least my boards are all equally spaced out. So make sure you don't pre-drill all the holes unless you look at the bench pieces that you have and, and they're good. Everything's straight and even. Okay, while we're looking at this up-close view and planning for this first board to kind of loosely hold the two sides of our bench together, I'm looking at I'm actually going to not have a skinny board right at the very front of this bench, so I'm really looking at the second hole and looking at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Or if you're counting the first hole that we're going to skip, the 6th hole. And I want to have this hole centered on our slat as much as possible. And you want the slat, there's a little bit of a lip in here, and you kind of see, hopefully you can see that under the camera, kind of slipping underneath this lip. Not touching the side of the metal bench, because again, you don't want to hold too much moisture and have this wood rot prematurely. So I'm aiming to pre-drill, at least for this first board, to kind of have it tuck in just a little bit underneath that ledge. And through the back here, dead center, we'll put a couple of 1/4 inch holes, because I'm using stainless steel bolts. That's where you do want to splurge, by the way, is with your hardware. Get some stainless steel bolts and nuts, and later on when you if you want to redo this project again later on, you'll be able to disassemble this bench without any problem and not have to cut those bolts out. So we're looking at, hopefully I'm not going to get in the way of the camera, but maybe putting, we're going to bring these holes in from the side of the board 1 inch dead center. Just showing you, I don't make this video too long by talking too much, but we are again 1 inch in, just because that happened to be where the hole was in the metal bench. Yours might be different. And because I was cutting 2 3/4 inches in half, we're looking at basically about 1 3/8 of an inch from the side of the board. 1, 2, 3, 4, fifth hole. There's our board with the hole in it. These are 1/4 inch in diameter bolts and going into a 1 1/4 inch hole. When I was making my previous bench, I kind of had to use a hammer and kind of lightly tap that through. You don't want to countersink these bolts either, because that'll collect water and cause the wood to rot. All right, so we'll slip that through the hole, come with our bolt underneath, hand tighten it, use a screwdriver. And you can't see this in the camera because I want to give you an up-close view of this, which now my arm is blocking. Come underneath with a wrench and a socket. This one happens to be a 7/16 socket, and tighten that up. And unless you have some help, this first board is going to be definitely very clumsy. Actually, I'm going to turn the screw here a little bit and use the socket to hold it still. There we go. And we'll just nudge this in. You want to have a little bit of play with this, because you're going to work on the squareness of your bench and everything as we go. Okay, now working by yourself, this would be more helpful or easier with 2 people, but get a little bit tricky, a little bit of a balancing act. But I'm going to bring this out a little bit and grab the second side of my bench. And with this particular bench, another reason why I'm skipping the first hole is on this side. It's broken off. You can get a little strip of metal in here and kind of give you that one extra hole to put the little skinny piece of wood in the front, but I'm just going to leave it there. It was comfortable on the other bench without it. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And 5. There we go. Bring this through. Try and get it to go through the hole. Or take it out and try again, just look at it. Now, we found these ends for this bench. You saw that I used pallet wood for the slat, so far we are looking at pretty much just free. I would strongly suggest that you do not skimp again on that hardware, because I have done this before. One of these, I said earlier, we had done in the past, and every bolt and nut that was stainless steel came right off, and everything that was not had to be cut. Okay, so now the goal as we put this together, well, and be seen in the camera, is to make sure everything is straight. So let me get some the nuts that are going to be in the back of these bolts, some quarters to use as spacers, and what I'll do now that this is together is I'll keep measuring the distances. Right now we're looking at about 45 inches wide on the top and, oh wow, 45 on the bottom. So we'll just make sure that these arms don't kind of bow out or bow in too much, and that everything stays relatively straight as we go. So here's what I was talking about. You can see the quarter and the bolts spaced in between each of these boards. I've made sure, I remeasured it, I think I misspoke earlier. The distance between the top of this ledge, this lip, to the other side is 44 1/4. You can see that the boards are very evenly spaced, and that I've gotten as, you know, about as perpendicular as I can, the wood to the metal, so everything's nice and even. So now with everything, you know, very precariously balanced here, let's see if we can't do this the first try without getting anything bumped and moved around. I'm going to take this drill, again 1/4 inch bit, and come up through the bottom and hold these boards with my hand and place these holes. I'll make sure every time I come up and look and make sure that none of these washers, spacers have gotten moved. Actually, I just thought about this. Why not put in the bolts as we go and keep everything from shifting? I'm trying to think of some issues I had while I was making the first bench. One of them was when I was doing this, one of the washers fell out. And so I put a hole in the wrong spot. And I haven't had it yet. Got really close on this one. There's always that issue as you are using salvaged wood. I didn't cut the board shorter so that we got completely rid of all of the nails. I just figured we would work around them. I stopped checking, didn't I? So you can see this last part actually is going pretty quick. And you will see when we're done with this that a couple of these holes are nowhere near the center of these boards, and some of them are. But we know the boards are evenly spaced. Double checking this one more time, we have in the front 44 and an 1/8, and the distance at the top between these are again 44 and an 1/8. With the bottom all tightened, almost completely tightened down, I've been sitting here and pushing and pulling these out, trying to get this as square as I can. These are not perfect, and of course trying to keep the uprights, you know, seemingly as perpendicular, as square as possible. So let's get the backboards. Okay, so we're ready to put our back on, and really, you know, if you want the cleanest hole, I really should not be drilling towards the front surface of these boards, but the way that I'm doing this out, and just seemed like the quickest way with these holes being in regular places to mark it this way and let the top of the bolt heads cover up any kind of splintering that we're going to have you know, as we drill our holes. And now, just to make sure these things don't move around on me any more than they need to or want to, slipper bolts in there, and do the other side. Yeah, you might want to make sure you don't drill through your hand. Okay, so all I have to do is slip some more bolts in, put the backs on, and I got one last piece on the top, and we'll be done. Now, if you get a complete set, you know, if you find one of these broken down benches with all the parts and you took the wood out, you will have a couple of support beams here just to kind of keep it from going out of plumb or vertical, rocking side to side, and there is a metal strip that goes up the middle of these boards to kind of tie them all together to make the whole bench a little bit stronger. So I said we were done with that last board, but I was kind of fibbing just a little bit. All we have to do now is, again, with some stainless steel screws so they don't rust out over the years, just start putting these supports in. And this middle piece is going to be fairly hard to bend, so you might want to kind of rough in the shape before you start doing this. I used another bench in the background to kind of use it as a leverage to get this to kind of bend in the shape that I need to. So now all I have to do is, you know, put a screw through all these holes, and then we'll be done. Bam! And there you go. A totally awesome bench out of pretty much upcycled material. Redid the metal pieces, pallet. I did spring for some very nice stainless steel hardware that really pays off in the years to come if you were to ever redo this, but you could not use stainless steel hardware. Other than that, I use a drill and a 1/4 inch drill bit. We used a router and a 90-degree rounded off router bit. That is optional. You could do the same thing or get the same sort of comfortable effect with just a palm sander. I used 80 grit sandpaper, 200 grit sandpaper, circular saw of some sort, and yeah, that's pretty much it. The bolts were 1.5 inches long and 1/4 inch in diameter, so of course we have some matching bolts there to go along, or nuts to go along with the bolts, and those stainless steel screws that you saw me using were 3/4 inch stainless steel wood screws, and that's pretty much it. I got a bench that'll last years to come, very comfortable, and cost next to nothing. I'm Mr. True. Bam! Go do a home project.